first method, there's three methods that we're going to study as to how to solve this. And what we're basically trying to do is we're trying to solve for roots. So method number one is to just graph it. So I could pull up graphing technology and I can graph this before doing anything with it. Alright, so here's a graph of the equation I put on the board. So what our primary focus is, last section we were focused on doing, finding the vertex. But now what we want to do is we want to solve, there's two ways to solve questions. One of the ways is they work with the roots. The second way is to find the vertex and find your maximum mins. So we're going to kind of work with both. But this way here, you can see that the roots are 4 and negative 2. So the first method that you learned is to just graph it using technology. Okay, so that's 4.1. That was the first thing that we did. The second method, because we're looking for the roots in the equation, which we also call the zeros of the equation, is I let y equal 0 because that's where it crosses the x-axis, right? And then I factor it. Factors of negative 8 that add to give me negative 2. X is equal to 4 and negative 2. So there's method number 2. Now the one that we did focus a lot on was our difference of squares. A squared minus b squared equals a minus b, a plus b. So you have to be able to recognize that. Again, when it comes to factoring, the first thing you're looking for is the greatest common factor. The second thing that you want to do is find the factors. If there's a value in front, then you have to use the longer method where you have the product, the sum, the factors. Okay? If it's a binomial, then more than likely you either only factor out one term or a value, or it's difference of squares. It's the only way that you can factor a binomial. Okay? The third method, the method that we're going to look at today, is solving this using completing the square again. Okay? Now the first time we used completing the square, we were looking for just the value of the vertex. But today we're going to use that method and solve to get what x is equal to here. Okay? So I use the same steps that I did before. So the first step is this. X squared minus 2x. Now the book is going to use both sides to do this. I'm going to keep it on the same side because that's what we learned before. Alright? So now, what's the next step after that? Factor out the a value. That's right. And since we don't have an a value, put in the blanks. That's good. Okay, and what goes in the blanks here?
Half of the second number, b value squared.
Right. So what is that? 1 squared gives me 1 out here. So far so good. Okay? 0 equals square root of that term, that sign, square root of that, all squared, and simplify the outside. So now, what would be the vertex of this graph?
1 and negative 9.
1 and negative 9. 1, negative 9. Okay? But now, at this point, I can now solve for my roots by solving for x here. So I need to get x minus 1 squared by itself. So how do I do that? Add 9. Exactly. So I get x minus 1 squared. Now I need to get rid of the squared value, so what do I do? Okay. What's the square root of 9? 3 or
Minus
minus 3. So I have to use both. Okay, so I have plus minus 3 because that's the square root of 9 equals x subtract 1. So now x minus 1 equals 3, x minus 1 equals negative 3. Let's solve. X is equal to 4, x is equal to
-2.
negative 2. There's method number 3 on how to solve for the roots. Okay? If we needed a method number 4, it would be the quadratic function. We've already done this. We did not do this method here as much in applied. We've done factoring in applied. We did graphing in applied. We did quadratic equation in applied. We just didn't solve using completing the square. The only thing we've used completing the square for so far is to get a vertex value. Okay? Alright, so let me look at another example. Okay, so 2x squared minus 12x minus 4 equals 0. Okay. So we're going to use the completing the square method. Now we could use factoring if at all possible. But what's the very first thing that I need to do? If I was to factor this, what should I do?
Oh,
Yeah. Take out what?
Greatest common factor.
Greatest common factor. Now look at there. Is there a greatest common factor? 2. Now, because I am solving, I can divide everything by 2 and I don't need to leave it on there. If I was just simply doing completing the square or factoring, I need to leave it there. But because I'm solving, whatever I do to the left, I do to the right. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. I get x squared minus 6x minus 2 equals 0. Now, is that a factorable equation now? Can I factor that? What are the factors of negative 2 that give me negative 6 as a sum? Think this through. What was the question? What are the only factors of negative 2? 1 and 2. Or negative 2, negative 2 and 1. Right? I need the factors of this that add to give me that. Is that possible?
No.
No. So I can't factor this. I can graph it, but I can't factor it. So let's use completing the square. What goes in the blank? 3 squared. 9. X minus 3 all squared minus 11 equals 0. So far so good. Okay, I need to get x minus 3 squared by itself. Add 11. Square root. X minus 3 is equal to plus minus the square root of 11.
3.3.
No, don't. Okay? We don't want to find out what that value is. If you were graphing it on your calculator, then I want the decimal value. But in this, I want you to leave it as a square root. It's way easier. Now all I have to do is get x by itself. So what do I have to do to get x by itself? Add 3. So I get 3 plus minus root 11. There's my two factors. 3 add root 11. 3 subtract root 11. Just leave it like that. Okay? So it's even simpler than having to solve it with your calculator. You can just leave it as that. Alright? So if you struggled before with completing the square, you're going to have to do a little more work. If you found completing the square easy, this is a breeze. There's nothing to it. Okay, when do I use this?
You can't factor.
When you can't factor. Just like the quadratic equation, I only use it when I can't factor. Factoring is the simplest, fastest way of doing any of these questions, so you hope that you can factor it. Okay, let's look at working example 2a. It has a squared plus 18a plus 32 equals 0. Notice I moved it over. Okay, so this is on page 166. All right, is this factorable? Is it factorable? Are there factors of 32 that add to give me 18?
Yeah,
Which?
16.
Very good. A plus 16, a plus 2 equals 0. A is equal to negative 16 and negative 2. That's how quick it is. Know your multiplication tables, know your factors. Makes your life a lot easier when you're doing this. Those of you that can't are going to struggle and take time. Time you don't have on a test. The reason you don't have time on a test is because you can't do these things quickly enough. So that's got to get fixed. You need to fix that, you need to work at that. Okay, but that's not the way they want us to do this question. They wanted us to complete the square. So let's complete the square. Again, I'm keeping it on the same side. Now you don't have to do this. There is another way. The book does teach you a different way. It would leave the negative 32 on the other side and then add on both sides. But I like to keep it consistent with what you have done so you don't get confused. Brackets, a squared plus 18a add a blank, plus 32, subtract a blank equals 0. What goes in the blank? 9 squared. 81. Okay? Square root of a squared? A. Add square root of 9 squared. All squared minus, what is that? 49. Good job. 49. Okay? So now how do I solve at this point?
Add 49 to the other side.
Add 49 to the other side. Now what?
Square root.
Square root it. Plus minus 7. Now I need to negative 9 plus minus 7. So a is equal to minus 9 add 7. That's 2. Negative 9 subtract 7. Negative 16. All right. The process isn't real difficult. Again, if you have a value in front of the a here, I don't right now, I have a 1 there, but if it's a value that's greater than 1, and you can possibly divide it out, divide it completely out. Like if you look at your working example 3 on 167, notice they have that negative 0.0025, 0.00025. I would divide everything by that value. And then that gets rid of it, and now you're down to a 1 in front, and then it's easy to complete the square at that point.
So do you have to like put it on the outside or no?
No, you don't. Because you're solving, you can get rid of it completely. Just divide both sides by it. And when you divide this side by it, it's going to be just 0. Okay?
So you like say you divide like plus 32 as well, or everything just in the back?
Let's look at the question. HD, so I'm going to put 0 equals negative 0.00025 d squared, right? Plus 0.3d plus 25, does that sound right?
2.5.
2.5? Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to divide everything by negative 0.00025. So I'm going to get 0 equals d squared. Take 0.3 and divide it by that value, please. 1200. Thanks. And take 2.5 and divide it by that value. 1,000?
10,000.
10,000?
Yes.
Okay. So there you go.
Okay.
All right? So you just divide everything by the a value. Now it's easy to complete the square at that point. Okay? So 4.3 was new. We did do 4.1 and 4.2. That's all there is in this book. We can probably expect to have an assignment maybe even as early as tomorrow and a test as early as Friday. So we're going to get through this fairly quickly. Again, we have 5 units to go before the end of the year. But this book is extensive, so we've got to get moving a little bit. Okay? 9, I think. All right? Okay, you've got the rest of today. I don't imagine there's questions. Nobody did any more breaks, so just go to work on that then.
Christine, over here, Shannon, I go get our messages.